Hello and a good afternoon from New York. My name is Bart van Ark and I'm Chief Economist at the Conference Board. And welcome to this special webcast that we do on our annual C-Suite Challenge. With a special, this time, focused on our results for Latin America. And I'm being joined today, of course, with one of my key colleagues here, but also with two colleagues from Mercer, who is our partner, has been our partner in Latin America for this survey, and who I will introduce to you in just a minute. Just to give you a very quick overview as an introduction of the survey, and then I will give you a few guidelines how you can get the most out of this webcast, and then I will introduce the panel and we get going. So first of all, the C-Suite Challenge is an annual survey. It used to be a CEO challenge only. We're only serving CEOs around the world. We now have actually interviewed more than 500 CEOs, but also close to 500 other C-suite positions, in particular CHROs, which we'll talk about a lot today, as well as CFOs. That really gives us a much bigger and wider perspective on what we're looking at. The nature of the survey, as you will see, has sort of three major components to it. One is that we have been asking respondents about some of the key strategies that they are applying to deal with some of the important business areas that they're dealing with. You see them on this slide. Human capital, customer relationships, operational excellence, regulation and risk, innovation and digitization, and sustainability. Well, that sort of covers almost everything that business leaders are concerned with. We also ask them additional questions about sort of the hot button issues. What are the things that sort of keep you awake at night as a C-suite leader? And then we always have some special questions, which this year are very much around the issue of digital transformation and how human capital is responding to this. As I mentioned, this is a survey that we do in partnership with many organizations, including Mercer, who you see on this list, who's our partner in Latin America, and several others that you see listed on this slide. Today's presenters, let me start there. First of all, I'm joined here in the studio by my colleague and primary author of the C-Suite Challenge survey, that is Chuck Mitchell, our Head of Knowledge Organization. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Bart. Looking forward to the discussion today.
Great. And then we have two colleagues from Mercer joining us virtually. First of all, we have Danielle Nabortny. And Danielle is the multinational client group leader for Latin America at Mercer. Danielle, it's great to have you on again. This is, I think, the second time we're doing this with you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here with you.
Fantastic. And then we've got Martin Ibanez-Frackham, and he's a senior partner also at Mercer. And Martin, thank you for joining us also today.
It's a pleasure to share this moment with you and the participants.
Fantastic. Looking forward to your insights, of course, in particular also your insights on Latin America. So just very quickly, some rules on participation. You can participate there's a slide missing here, but I'll try to do this by heart. You can ask questions. You can do that via a chat box, which is available at the bottom left of your screen. So please put in any questions during the webcast. We can take care of them here, and we'll discuss them with the colleagues here in the studio or joining us virtually. You can download the presentation. You can do that via the file download pod, which is on the bottom center of your screen. You can view the video, our PowerPoint full screen, and you do that by clicking the four arrows, which are at the top right of the screen. And then at the end of the webcast, we are always asking for an evaluation. It's a very brief evaluation, but we'd really like to hear from you on how we can continue to improve this program. And of course, we will share the program on demand shortly after this webcast, approximately 48 hours. So if you feel that colleagues in your organization might benefit from it, then please do so. And then in this webcast, there are several ways for you to earn credits. You can get credits through HRCI, through SHRM, and through CPE. Make sure that you stay online for the entire webcast. The credit is, of course, only available for live participation in this webcast. And when the boxes appear, make sure that you fill in your full name and email address, but also specify specifically which program, HRCI, SHRM, or CPE, that you are participating in. So that's all for introductory remarks, and Chuck, let's go right away to some of those great insights that we're getting from the C-Suite Challenge. And you really put this together into sort of 8 important insights that we are seeing on this slide. And maybe you can quickly take us through those most important insights.
Right, thanks, Bart. Yeah, absolutely. I think when we look at this, we examine the survey data and our conversations with respondents. We come really across to these kind of global insights, and they're also valid certainly to a large extent in Latin America, and in some cases even emphasized in that region. But the thing that really struck us this year that really topped it was the notion of recession fading as a concern among CEOs and the C-suite. In previous years, in fact, last year, as a hot button issue, global recession was the #1 issue. This year, it fades down towards the bottom of the pack. So, but even as those recession fears fade, we're seeing rising concerns about global trade. We're seeing rising concerns about income inequality and disparity among CEOs and the C-suite. The other notion too, and we know globally that the labor markets are tight. And there's a huge concern among CEOs about attraction and retention of talent, but it's also forcing organizations to reconfigure or to relook at what the makeup or composition of their workforces will be in the future, and this is the near future in 3 to 5 years. So there's some interesting findings there, but it's really a key trend that they're relooking at their workforces. And agility, everyone's talking about agility, the importance of agility. And we asked CEOs to define what agility looks like. And part of that notion that comes out of it, it's really on the foundation of change management. It's really about facilitating change and having resilient employees. And digital disruption is a big issue. So the notion that digital technologies are really posing a unique set of risks and a unique set of opportunities that a lot of organizations are struggling to maximize. Key finding on that. That there's a digital talent gap, and CEOs are a little more optimistic than their C-suite colleagues when it comes to actions that they're actually taking to upskill and retain digital talent. And the future in digital transformation in the digital era, HR especially needs to look at redefining leadership and leadership capabilities and to lead digital transformation and to lead that change. And that came out very clearly throughout. That innovation is about culture. Technology is an enabler, but it's all about culture in the minds of CEOs. And one of the issues that has occurred, or that does come up in the survey globally, is that organizations are struggling how to measure innovation, and they're struggling how to measure those internal signposts as well that point to having an innovative culture. And of course, the administration in Washington, the Trump administration, is driving a unique set of concerns among U.S. CEOs. There's a variance of what CEOs in the U.S. are concerned about compared to...
And not only the U.S. CEOs, right? I guess globally CEOs are getting concerned about a pretty unusual political landscape that we're looking at, and I guess that includes Latin America, given all the trade challenges that we're looking at. So Martin, let me ask you sort of first response to this. Those are the global observations. Now, when you look at it from a Latin America perspective, what are the most important things that you recognize from your perspective in this summary?
Sure. I mean, my comments are biased towards my expertise, which is consulting on human capital. So there are two reflections. Initially, one is connected with the Thai labor markets. I mean, like when we talk with clients across the region, they all have the same difficulties finding and attracting the caliber of individuals that they need to deliver on their strategy. And despite that, I mean, when you look at unemployment in most countries in Latin America, it's high. I mean, it's very common to see unemployment figures to be in the high single-digit numbers, and in some countries in the double-digit numbers. And if you consider those individuals that have given up looking for a job, and then they are not captured by the unemployment figures, I mean, the percentage of individuals that are unemployed or have an employment that is doesn't meet their expectation is very high. But despite that, I mean, like the companies are not finding the people that they need, so the largest challenge for these economies is connected with employability. I mean, the demands from the organizations that don't match the capabilities for the different individuals. So the other reflection is connecting with digitalization and the impact that digitalization has on the workforce and leadership. And I will share a story. I mean, like one of the clients that I do a significant amount of work is in the retail industry, and as you may know, for instance, changing the cashiers to self self-service is becoming more and more common, and that means that many employments are disappearing in this industry in Latin America. Or also, I mean, like some of them, because one is my client, that they do business online, and for doing business online, it's common that now you meet in the region that you begin to chat with bots, and so again that this also is replacing work that was prior performed by individuals, and that is causing a lot of tension. First on the workforce, I mean, like people that are being displaced, and also, but also the needs for the organization to find people with the different skill sets, and how fast they can either help the individuals to acquire the new skills, so they can be used in the new context, and then there is a significant impact on leadership, because the qualities that are required to lead in this new environment are very different. So I mean, sorry if I'm too long.
No. Great insights. Daniel, anything to add to you? One of the things that I'm also interested in is these political realities that Chuck observed at the end. They're beginning to impact in Latin America also, right? Some of them are global, some of them are truly regional. Brazilian politics, Mexican politics, Venezuela. So are those creating more uncertainties in this environment also?
Well, yes, and we have elections in these countries, so really this is impacting the economy. Obviously some uncertainty, and there is a growing trend, especially in Mexico, to have a different kind of government and probably different kind of business environment as well. So these are certainly concerns from a context perspective. Also, the strength of the U.S. economy is also impacting the strength of the U.S. dollar, and then this is a big thing for Latin America, since we export a lot to the U.S. So this is a big issue that we are facing at this time.
Yeah, and again, there are sort of good and bad things to this, right? I mean, some of this is the outflow of a better global economic performance. But it happens all during an environment of a lot of disruptions that we're seeing in the economy as being identified in this slide. This is a nice transition actually to a first question that we can ask to our audience. We have a couple of poll questions, and the first poll question that we're asking is a little bit about hot button issues, about things that sort of are keeping you awake at night. And our colleagues are now putting up this question for you, and you can vote. It's a pretty long list, there are about 10 of those, but the question to you is, what do you see as the two most critical hot button issues facing your organization in Latin America today? So just you can vote. I think you can pick two. I'm not sure if that's possible, otherwise it's just one, but if you can pick two, that's great. So pick one or two out of this list, and we'll see how that is going to align with the responses that we received from our CEOs. I think the next question is basically just focus on CEOs. So to give you a little bit more time to see what are the most important challenges that you are facing in your organization, and we'll give it a couple of more seconds for those of you who are still thinking about this, but I'm going to count it out. It's already happened. I closed it. So here we go, Chuck. Your first reaction here. Failure to attract top talent, 50% of the votes. And the rest is pretty equally divided. Some people are saying creating new business models because of disruptive technologies, and then everywhere else we get a few other votes somewhat distributed across. But the majority of the votes really coming out of failure to attract top talent. So let's give it away what CEO said. They also picked that as the most important one.
That's spot on. Everybody wins the prize.
Yep.
CEOs in Latin America, there's a lot of concern, obviously, around the whole talent issue, but it's also tied back to the whole notion of digital disruption, digital transformation. So when you look at those hot button issues with the arrows that are highlighting, they really are kind of digitally related. The notion of creating new business models is directly tied back to disruption. The notion of new competitors globally, I mean, the low bar of entry now makes it competitors emerging not only in your own backyard but globally because of digitization or digital transformation. The notion of next generation leaders very much having to do with managing disruption and change. And obviously, cybersecurity is the wrapper that goes around it all, and it's just a growing issue in every portion of the world that we've seen. We've seen it rise in emerging markets and Asia Pacific too. So those are the key issues that CEOs see. So our audiences were spot on identifying talent.
Right, and Martin, it seems to be very much in line with the comments that you made earlier, right? I mean, if you look at these hot button issues, again, talent seems to be absolutely the top one.
Yes, very much. I mean, I will add some additional figures that connecting with developing next generation leaders. I mean, like when you look at the workforce today, we collect data every year, and in our database we collect approximately over 2 million people who are employed for different organizations across Latin America, and approximately today 30% of that workforce belongs to what those people call millennials. However, when we do projections for the next 5 years, so that number will go up, and probably, I mean, it will be close to 50% of the workforce. And companies, in our experience, recognize that the skills to manage millennials are different, and therefore, I mean, the concern about developing this next generation leaders is a major concern for many organizations that we interact with.
So we have a bit of an echo problem on your side, Martin, so our people will work with you to make sure that we can make this work. But Chuck, maybe you can pick up and ask Daniel for some comments. This next slide compares Latin America with the global economy and with the US and Asia and Europe. So we see some interesting differences also in terms of challenges that Latin American CEOs are facing, right?
Yeah, no, definitely so. And you know, there is that convergence around the talent and business models issue. But I think when you look a little bit further down the line, this concern about the income disparity and inequality is really significant in Latin America compared to other regions, with the exception of Asia. But labor relations and what we've been seeing play out in the news regionally in Latin America in the past couple of months, especially, it really has intensified the concern of CEOs and the C-suite in Latin America compared to global colleagues. Very much more of a concern, as the concern around workforce diversity, and that's always something that surprises us a little bit when we see it come a little bit further down the list in some of the more mature markets, where the whole notion of diversity and inclusion is really, the business case has been proven in essence. It's very much, should be very much embedded in organizations' processes. But we see that it's still very much a concern in both Latin American CEOs and the C-suite. So I think those are kind of really interesting differences on a regional basis.
So Daniel, I mean, you recognize this also in your Latin American practice, that these are really top issues also compared to the rest of the world?
Absolutely. Starting from the income inequality and disparity, this has been a big issue for decades in Latin America, and even though economic growth in the last decade, things are far from good. So this is a challenge that we have in most of the countries. I would say all the countries. The other element, labor relations, it's very, very tied to the labor law and the protective law and the unions' power. So all the countries, I would say, or most of the countries in Latin America, you have a lot of very powerful unions that they can really stop the economy. We have had last week a very huge strike from truck drivers in Brazil. And actually, I'm in Argentina today, and we have a very similar situation as we speak here in Buenos Aires.
So let me ask you, because some of these problems are, as you say, I mean, they've been there for a long time in Latin American economies. So
Yeah.
this whole era of digital transformation and disruption, is that making these problems bigger than they used to be? Is it more of a challenge for businesses now, given all the disruption that we're seeing in our companies, to deal with these issues around labor relations and disparity and inequality?
Well, that's a great question. Actually, I would say the business community in general is very conscious of this. Probably, the unions and some governments, they are fighting against what is inevitable, I would say. So now there is a lot of tension, and I envision a lot of tension in the near future because of the disruption, the technology, coming in, and the, let's say, how we perform business at this time in Latin America. So more challenges to come on this.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons, and Chuck, this is a transition to the next chart here, I think a lot of the challenges that you're facing in that sort of unequal environment where people have different opportunities is that we know that a lot of digital transformation in business is around culture, right? It's a cultural issue to create an environment in which people can rapidly innovate and deal with these kind of disruptions. And that's what this slide is speaking to when we're looking at the top strategies. The earlier slide was about hot button issues, but this is much more about the strategic concerns that business leaders have relative to all these business areas, and its culture is important. So that's why I was asking the question to Daniel. I mean, if you're in an environment where people have different opportunities, how can you create a culture in which people want to collaborate and work together?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point in that we've been doing the survey for almost 20 years, for 2 decades, and what we've seen gradually and certainly accelerate in the last 3 to 5 years is this formation or notion around culture, where a lot of the approaches was almost programmatic. It was about individual programs, individual initiatives. Now they're being all strung together, and where the culture of an organization is the differentiator, not only in the eyes of the customers and clients, but also in the mind of Wall Street analysts. There's a huge focus on culture. So in this slide, those with the check marks are culturally oriented strategies. And if you see, these are the top 5 strategies from Latin America. That the culture play here is really heavy. And as I say, it's been a gradual realization over time. To me, the one thing that I find really interesting in this is the innovation side, where it is really all about culture, and it's really about inclusion and a culture of inclusion, having those lost voices or voices throughout the organization being heard to drive innovation up from the bottom. Innovation is everybody's job, not just an R&D job. So the CEOs now, we've really seen that evolve over the last few years, the importance of culture.
Yeah. So Martin, I mean, that is the challenge that a lot of Latin American organizations are dealing with. You must be seeing that in your day-to-day practice. Martin, now we cannot hear you at all.
No, I can speak, but Daniel, I think you were comment on this one, no?
Okay,
Yes,
Daniel,
yes,
there
sorry.
you go.
Yeah,
There you go.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So on culture, what I would say, I mean, you really identified, several topics that really touched culture, agility, flexibility, diversity, innovation, collaboration, and teams. What we have seen in the last, I would say, 18 months is companies trying to identify which are the right drivers to change the culture, basically trying to ensure that employees, they have the right behaviors to drive results. So I mean, we have been working with clients on how to design the organization. Do we need to have an innovation structure, or innovation is everywhere? Do we need to have a transformation office, or a transformation is something that is a special project? I mean, there are many things that are happening on the org design. The other driver that is very relevant, it's leadership capabilities. What type of leaders do we need? Which are the capabilities that they need to have in order to be successful? And the third one that we identified as drivers are implementing technologies and changing the way they work. So on this, all the new systems and the technologies available, mobile, it's really a big changer. So org design, leadership capabilities, and implementing technologies are really drivers in order to ensure that the culture is right in order to deliver business results.
So let's sort of break this down a little bit. Some of the issues you're talking about: agility, leadership, and then of course the skills that you need to deal with these technologies. So let's start talking about the workforce itself a little, and the future of this workforce and the challenges that we're facing. That now in this digital environment we see more of a contingent workforce. And Martin, here's a very nice slide that is coming from some work that you've been doing, putting together a lot of different resources that looks how much the job of the past, the traditional job, is changing towards a new type of jobs with very different competencies in order to drive digital transformation. So maybe you can take us a little bit through this chart to understand how dramatic this change is.
Sure. I mean, we have been doing the research on this topic, and we published something recently, research that we conducted together with Oliver Wyman, which is a sister company from Mercer, about how this disruption is affecting the job market. And there are a few messages that I think are important from this slide. The first one that is coming from the figures on the left side, you'll see that roughly half of the activities that are performed today are possible of automation, so 45% of activities can be automated. However, that doesn't mean that all those activities will be, all those jobs will be eliminated in the future. Since with our model we predict that roughly 10% of those jobs will disappear. However, what will change significantly is the task that will be required over the next few years. And there you move to the right side of the slide, you see that the tasks that are being performed today, some are transactional in nature, some are more relational connected, and there are others where deep expertise is required. And you see, our forecast for the future, how those activities that require deep expertise, or those activities that require relationship skills, that they will grow significantly, and the transactional skills will be less relevant. So that's one first highlight from our research. And the other one is connected with the free agents. You will see that if you look at particularly organizations today in Latin America, most of those activities are performed by people who are employed by the different organizations. And our models predict that in the future there will be a significant percentage of those activities that will be performed by free agents, what we call here external. So that's a key message from the research how the disruption will change the labor market.
So those are big transitions, Chuck, and in terms of, first of all, what are the competencies, and secondly, as this chart was showing, how quickly the traditional workforce that has a permanent job is changing to this more contingent workforce. When we look at our survey, are business leaders prepared for it? Do they see this coming, or are we still thinking this is far out?
I think there's two questions there. Do they see it coming? The short answer is yes. Are they prepared for it? Probably not. I think that's one of the struggles that they look at when you talk about externals or contingent workforces. There are issues that surround it. We just had a joint strategic HR conference in Chicago a couple of weeks back, and on everyone's mind was, how do you manage that contingent workforce? How do you keep it engaged? It's a big issue. And as you see here on these slides, this is the Latin American C-suite. By an overwhelming majority, things are going to change, and in the next 3 to 5 years, C-suite executives in the region really do anticipate that the composition of the workforce really changes, and you get away from traditional full-time employees into the externals or the contingents, for sure. Big numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And big changes.
Yeah, there was one question here, because we still have a little bit of sound problems with Martin. So people were asking on the previous chart, what the difference between internal and external meant. But internal basically that means people working for the company who are on the company's payroll, versus external are people who are used on contract or contingent and things like that, right? So I think that's the right interpretation. if I understand it well.
Correct.
Yeah, good. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
And one of the challenges, I think, that, especially in the digital age, is that the estimate is that a digital skill is outdated within 18 months. So that struggle is, do you hire for that skill that in 18 months you still have to evolve your talent continuously? You have to upskill. And that creates a different challenge than organizations have faced in previous years or previous eras.
Yeah, and here this chart, you're looking at how much leaders see that the percentage of directly hired contingent workers, freelancers, will increase in 76%, strongly 2/3. And when it comes to digital labor, to what extent sort of robotic process automation and so on will increase even 83%. So I definitely see it coming, for sure.
Right, definitely so.
Martin?
So, Bart, this is Daniel. Bart,
Daniel,
just
sorry.
one comment. Yeah. This is an interesting, data point because business leaders are seeing that this is going to change. So, good example on where the reality goes faster than the regulation and the governments. So that will be always a challenge for companies. So how they can lead the change in an environment, in a regulation that is not exactly prepared for this. So again, these are challenges that are outside the company, but they certainly have an impact on how the companies implement these changes.
Yeah, and that's actually a great transition to the next chart, Chuck, because this chart is really, we did ask leaders, what do you see as the primary concerns to leverage those non-traditional employees, and there were some really interesting results.
Right, and globally and in Latin America, the bottom line is talent, a skill shortage is a skill shortage is a skill shortage, and even if you're going outside to find that talent elsewhere, their biggest concern is that it's still not going to be available.
Well, or perhaps even more problematic, because the question is, the idea is that the bigger pool outside, so we can easily find those skills, but have those people had enough time and enough investment to actually get the skills that you need as a company?
Right. No, very much the case. And where does the training come from? And there's an interesting question that comes up here when a lot of our members tell us that when it comes to entry level positions, that people aren't hiring at that entry level that they used to in previous years. So the question is going to be, when you need those skills, when you need that experience, and the entry level positions aren't there, where does it come from? And that's going to be a conflict or an issue in years to come.
Yeah. So Martin, we hope your sound problem has been resolved now, because this chart is actually really interesting, because you take it a level deeper by basically looking at sort of the much deeper underlying, what you call social cultural shifts that are underway. So when we talk about this contingent workforce, you have to look one level deeper and say, what is actually happening in the composition of our population and our future workforce? And you come to 6 very important trends here.
Correct. And I will comment on some of them. We already alluded to the rise of the free agent. How this is affecting the economies in Latin America. But to begin with family and how families are built. As you may know, Latin America is a very traditional society. So 30 years ago, when I finished my university, I had to make a number of choices. For instance, whether I would like to get married or not, whether I would like to have children or not, and for instance, what was the sex of my partner, and at that time in Latin America, the choices were, very limited. I would say that a very large percentage of the people would answer those questions in the same way. And this has been evolving fast, and actually people today, when they are in the early 20s in Latin America, most probably they will answer one of these 3 questions in a different way, and that is creating a lot of challenges for instance, for organizations. How they manage different aspects, like for instance benefits. I mean, like we were, I mean, last week we were working with a company that they roll out a parental leave a program for all the countries in Latin America, responding to the changes in the traditional family. So I mean that. Another one that I will comment, because we can take it all the time, is the Asian population, and you, I mean, you may know that in most countries in Latin America the life expectancy is growing very fast, and that is creating a lot of tension at different fronts. One is at the society, I mean, because of the pension plan systems, I mean, like which are unfunded and will have trouble. Then the companies that they have pension plans and they are insufficient, and also with retirement. I mean, like with people wanting to work. I mean, more years, probably in a different way, but they wanted to make longer careers, and companies that they have a talent pipeline prepared for people retiring somewhere between 60 to 65 years old. So I mean, these sociocultural changes are having a huge impact on organizations, and will have an even larger impact in the future.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic chart that really shows what an enormous changes this workforce is undergoing. So we now looked a little bit at the workforce, and let's now sort of look at okay, once we manage one way or another to get the workforce into the door, can they really help us to build an agile organization? So now we need to talk a little bit about defining agility. And we first want to ask you what you as an audience think agility is about. So there's a poll question coming up that my colleagues are going to put up right now, and that question is about what do you see as the two most critical traits, competencies, characteristics of an agile organization. So what is for you most important in terms of characteristics of an agile organization? And you've got a choice here out of 6 things that you can pick. So we give you a little bit of time to sort of read them through, and then Chuck, you'll take a quick look at what our CEOs are saying around this. So we'll give it a few more seconds before we close the poll here, and then compare it with the results that we're seeing in our C-Suite Challenge survey. So I think we probably can close it now. It seems to be stabilizing. Thank you. So quite interesting, 55% are really talking about leaders. Effective and engaged change leaders is absolutely critical. 61%, even a little bit more down the list, is communicate effectively from all levels, up and down. So it's the communication part that's an important part of the culture. And then there's a group that is talking about an open and transparent speak up culture, and then the other two get some votes as well. So how does that align with what we were hearing from CEOs?
Yeah, I mean, very much so. Again, the audience gets the prize on this, that the number one issue across the board in Latin America, CEOs, C-suite, global, and global CHROs that were part of our responding survey do see that notion of agility being about having the right managed change leaders in place. A critical aspect to build resilience and agility and flexibility. It's interesting to note though that in Latin America, in the CEO's view, that flatter organizations or flatter structures ridding itself of the hierarchies and silos is seen as critical, more critical to CEOs than in the C-suite. And I think another data point that really does jump out and kind of speaks. I think it speaks to not only CEOs in Latin America, but CEOs globally, is that notion of the effective use of big data, technology, data-driven decisions, where in Latin America, C-suite and globally, CHROs see it as a critical aspect of agility. CEOs, less so. That they're, it may be part generational too, that they're not appreciating as much as their colleagues in the C-suite the importance of data-driven decisions and big data as a contributor to agility and flexibility, being able to make those decisions faster. Right. And I think those are the numbers that really jump out at me.
Yeah, so a lot of agility is, of course, to sort of avoid risk, but probably what is at least as important, certainly in the longer term, is the ability to reward agility, right, and to to really be able to give incentives to people to behave more agile. What do you see in the results there?
Yeah, that there is some understanding of the importance of agility. When you look at those numbers that strongly agree, it's still, you know, a third or less than a third of CEOs that strongly agree that their organizations actually understand the importance of having agile and fluid teams. But I think the second part of that question is where the gap comes in, and that's providing incentives to promote those agile teams. A lot of organizations are still managing through past paradigms. The notion of training, of rewarding, of incenting, of measuring performances on an individual basis, not on a team basis. And that's part of the thing that's going to change through digital transformation as the nature of work changes, as you alluded to earlier, that it becomes more team oriented. And I think this side shows that message has not yet really come across on a universal basis.
Daniel, any thoughts from your side?
Yeah. Just, you know, the first reaction is agility. It's obviously a critical element here. In countries in Latin America, I would say that is probably a little more critical because the outside environment is more unstable. So you need to really make decisions fast in order to react to unexpected changes. So this is a kind of important consideration. And then I can tell you some stories because this is all about making decisions fast and be effective and deliver value. So I can tell you about I don't know, an exporter of commodities who has been designing a reward program for their traders and some measurements related with agility or how fast they react to changes in the market was one of the elements to design some part of their variable compensation or rewards. So this is a kind of example of how you know these companies are reacting in Latin America, trying to be agile and to deliver value to the business.
Right. So Chuck, what does an organization that is agile look like?
Yeah, I mean, certainly for digital transformation, to be successful at digital transformation, to be an agile organization, to be flexible, there's really kind of four characteristics that distinguish the good ones, the organizations that are effective at doing this. And that was alluded to certainly by the CEO responses to the question on what defines agility is that notion of flexible structures, flatter organizations, the hierarchy disappears. So it allows for that collaboration across not only functions but geographies. The notion of working in teams and fluid teams, and these are there's a lot of terms for it. In the U.S., we refer to it sometimes as the Hollywood effect, where teams form around projects, work the project, disband. No one has if you will, a permanent position or role because these teams reform all the time. And those that are good at digital transformation encourage those teams and incent those fluid teams that come and go. It's decentralized decision making, and that is also supported by a lot of data-driven decisions. And again, that our audience recognizes the notion of communication and the transparency in the communication. A critical part, seen as a critical part of the success contributor or enabler for digital transformation, for agility and flexibility. So those four elements are really critical, and they're all culture plays too, in essence, and that gets back to our original point.
Yeah, that culture piece that is very visible in this agility story, and that's really where the things get connected. Yeah. So we now have seen the characteristics of the future workforce, the characteristics of an agile organization. So now the next question is: do we actually see that organizations feel they are prepared for this in a future of innovation and digital transformation? So one question that is in our survey is that we basically asked our leaders, is my organization a technology leader in its industry? And what you see in this chart is basically the percentage of leaders who said, I strongly agree with that statement, which is the light blue and the light red part of that bar, or leaders that say, I somewhat agree with that statement. So what you see here is that globally, about 50% of the leaders that we interviewed were basically saying, I either strongly or somewhat agree that my industry is a technology leader. Not very different in the case of Latin America. When we asked them about how satisfied are you overall with your ability as a company to innovate, again, sort of, 50% were either strongly or somewhat agreeing, but the percentage that strongly agreed with it was actually smaller. So if you take Latin America, if you look at the light blue part in Latin America, it's less than 10%. So less than 10% of leaders in Latin America strongly agree with the statement that they are satisfied with their organization's ability to innovate. That sounds a little bit like the glass half empty, Martin. Would you agree? Or Daniel, I think one of you was going to comment on a little bit on those results.
Yes, I do agree that. I mean, I see Latin Americans that are optimistic. I think we tend to rate ourselves better than when we actually think on what is the current status. So for instance, I know the challenges that companies face in terms of driving innovation and adapting to digitalization, particularly, with the HR function, and I have some hard figures for instance, on HR technology. And there is a positive message and a negative message from the figures that we see. The positive is that the HR technology investments, how much money companies are investing in the HR technology software, is growing very rapidly, and probably more rapidly than in other parts of the world. So that's a positive side. However, the negative is that when you see the level of technology that companies use today in HR, is well behind. What is required and needed. So that maybe to some extent represents the difficulties and the challenges that we face to drive innovation and the use of technology.
Yeah, and actually, it's yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think I think that there's an interesting point there that. When we look at the data from the survey across the CHRO spectrum, it was really kind of striking to us that in almost any response that had to deal with technology or big data use or data analytics, that CHROs see that as much greater priority than the CEOs did. And that to us was encouraging. And I think to your point, right, that there's a realization that that for a long time that function has been behind when it comes to effectively using data analytics. And now there's this realization, almost this burning platform, if you will, for pardon the cliche, that it's there. And we see that in the responses. And that really kind of jumped out at us, that the message has gotten across into the HR community about the importance and the necessity of it.
So we now have in Europe this new regulation that is called the General Data Protection Regulation. So it's much more care about the privacy in the way that businesses are dealing with this. And this is not just a European issue, because any global company that is doing business in Europe or not doing business in Europe has to deal with these privacy issues. So that seems to me particularly hard for HR leaders, right? So because, how do you, it's not just about the privacy of your customers, it's also about the privacy of your employees. So do you think that organizations can deal with that kind of constraint?
I think initially it's going to have an impact on how you can use data analytics and strategic workforce planning to a certain extent, because of the positive affirmation you need from an employee for every use of that data. So it becomes difficult, to keep the data set, the integrity of the data set as you get opt-outs. Yeah. Is it going to give you the full picture, the real picture that you see? Just the difficulty of getting people to get in, and for each individual use. Now, I think it's going to play out in case law over time, right? And that's going to be the issue. And I think a lot of organizations that we've spoken to are playing a little bit of wait and see. They're doing the basics, they're doing the fundamentals, but the burden that it puts on HR to get those permissions is going to probably set that back a few years.
Yeah. So Daniel or Martin, any concerns with your companies around this privacy of data of employees once you get into these technologies? Any thinking from you around this? Go ahead.
Just one comment. I mean, we have been working hard with clients on how to deal with this new regulation. Certainly, in our day-to-day work, we manage data from employees, so we are working diligently on this. But this has been a really difficult thing to really comply. And as you know, there is a transition period from, I think, May 25th. I don't know. I think that there is a kind of 2 months transition, and we are working diligently on that. But it's really a big challenge.
Yeah, I think one of the other issues that the companies have been focusing on the external, on the customer data side, right? And that the internal data side, especially on the HR side, is kind of taken a back seat. And they all have equal importance under the law, and that's an issue that a lot of companies kind of were behind on.
Yeah, and I think that's very important to realize. It's absolutely true that, of course, you think about your customer base, but it's the law and the regulation as much applies to your employees, and actually your employees care about it, right? They want you as an employer to be, cautious and work properly with the data that they have available for you. I just want to go a little bit back to the issue of leadership and skills that we have available in our leadership. So to do that, I again want to ask you the last poll question that our colleagues have already put up, and that is really focusing on whether our leaders are prepared for this digital disruption. So the question is, our leaders currently have the skills and knowledge necessary to make our organization successful in a digitized world, and you either strongly agree or somewhat disagree. So it's pretty easy, pretty limited number of choices that you have here. And then again, we were able to compare that with the results that we're getting from our survey in this respect. And I think we can probably close the survey right now. So about 55% of you, so the majority, somewhat disagree with that statement. 36% somewhat agree. And only 9% strongly agree. And that's actually pretty amazing, because when you look at the actual responses that we've been looking at, and you look at the sixth line here, it's the Latin America results, that is almost exactly what they were saying. Less than 10% of them actually strongly agree with the statement that our leaders have the skills and knowledge necessary. And then it's only another sort of 35% that perhaps somewhat agree with that. And what is also striking here is that Latin America comes out lower than other organizations around the world. So Daniel, it seems that there's a real challenge, in addition to what any company around the world is facing in Latin America, around the leadership question. How do you explain that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have been facing this leadership challenge for a long time. I believe that companies are investing significantly in order to overcome this challenge. But in general, I really feel that this is what we are facing. I don't know, Martin, if you have additional insights on this.
Yes. I mean, we work with companies, helping them out to prepare for this future of work, and actually one area, for instance, where we do significant amount of work is connected with flexibility. I mean, how companies incorporate things like a flexible schedule or remote working remotely and other things, and they confront significant challenges in terms of leadership skills. So it's not only an issue of policies, I mean, of developing policies and communicating policies where they provide flexibility, but it's a huge issue on leadership and how they help these traditional business leaders to get used to move in a different environment.
Yeah, and one of the things that leaders or companies would have to do is to really, what you see in the right-hand chart here, is to expose leaders in multiple functions to digital experiences, right? So, traditionally leaders quite often have their business school background is very process management oriented, rather than really understanding what the opportunities is that the new technology is offering you. And the question here was to leaders, I mean, do we sufficiently expose leaders in those functions to digital experiences? And again, you can see the results, sort of 50%, but those who strongly agree, for example, in Latin America, only 10%. And what's particularly striking, CHROs are much more negative here than the other functions, right? I mean, so not even 40% agree that we do enough from that point of view. So that seems to be a real opportunity that we have in human capital, is to really make sure that leaders get a better understanding of what technology can do. And that actually is a good transition to, I think, the last slide, which I want to spend the last 2-3 minutes on and get some comments from each of you. And that is really zooming in a little bit more on human capital. And we've seen this slide before just for Latin America, but here you see a bit of a global perspective. And again, you see here, Latin America much agree with the rest of the world to communicate effectively across all functions. So that's the culture thing that we were looking at. But then again, Chuck, strikingly improve leadership development programs, number 2 in the case of Latin America, whereas in the rest of the world, that is really not the most important thing. So that leadership question seems to be critical for the region.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I think one of the things that we've seen over the course of the years in this survey too is that CEOs have broadened their definition of talent. Over the course of the years, we did see on a global basis a focus on high potentials, on the top side, on the leadership side. And what we've seen over the last few years is that definition being broadened out. So where you're providing employment and training across the organization at all levels. I guess in Asia Pacific, leadership is a big issue, and you'd see that at higher than it is globally there. But yeah, Latin America certainly that notion of developing leadership in the digital transformation is seen as a big issue.
So Daniel, what are the sort of most 3 important things that, in your view, a leadership development program should have in it? What are the 3 things that you would mention are critical in order to develop a strong leadership?
Yeah, I will ask Martin to address this one, please.
Okay, Martin.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if I will follow with the 3, but I mean,
well, you can take 2 or 5, whatever.
Yes, that comes. Yes, the top of mind. I mean, when I look at the leadership curriculum of many of the organizations that we work with, I mean, there are 2 areas that are usually in almost all programs, and one is innovation, and the other one is agility. I mean, I see those 2 factors. I mean, and are very much connected with the strategies that comes from the response from this survey. I mean, companies are very concerned about how to drive innovation and how to create a more agile environment.
Yeah, so what I find interesting is, a lot of this Latin American companies have in common with the rest of the world. The importance of culture, the huge disruptive impact that digital transformation has everywhere in the world. But then there are some clear differences, and I think this leadership issue on how to develop stronger leaders, very much going back to the comment that Martin made earlier, when you look about these seismic changes that you're seeing in social cultural traits, seem to be something very specific for Latin America, at least much more prominent in the Latin American case. We have to wrap up, unfortunately, but I thought it was a really good conversation. Chuck, first of all, thank you for always looking at this from multiple different perspectives. And Daniel and Martin, thank you for your comment. Thank you for Mercer being a partner with us here in Latin America. And we hope to continue that collaboration in going forward. I just want to bring to your attention, of course, we try to answer your questions in the future. You don't need us anymore. Machines are going to do that for you. That's the future. But for now, you can still go to our website and you can see some of the publication. Of course, there's C-Suite Challenge itself that you can download and look at the results in a lot more detail. There's some sub-publications that you can look at from various perspectives. There's a lot more that we're doing around talent and digital transformation. There's another report that looks at cybersecurity. On June 12, we have a webcast that you can register for on whether your talent strategy is future-proof. Are you dealing with all the issues that we've been talking about in the webcast? And then finally, those of you who are in the New York area are, of course, also welcome to register for our annual Change and Transformation Conference, which is happening in June 2018. Finally, don't forget the evaluation. We always like to hear from you. We apologize for some of the sound problems that we had. but we hope that you were able to benefit from the insights. And again, Martin, Daniel, Chuck, thank you very much. I'm Bart van Ark, I'm Chief Economist at the Conference Board, and I wish you all a very good remainder of this day.